Hey everyone, welcome back to GameSpot's coverage of E3 2018. I'm Mike Mahardy here with Lucy James as always.
Hello.
And we have an exciting guest and an exciting game on our stage right now. We're here with Kyle Rowley.
Hello.
Hi.
Associate Design Director at CD Projekt.
Yes, Associate Design Director at CD Projekt Red. Working on
CD
Cyberpunk.
Projekt. Yes, Cyberpunk 2077.
Yes.
All right, so the trailer finally released,
Yeah.
2 days ago now? It's been out in the open?
Oh man, it's such a relief for it to finally be out.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
It's shrouded in secrecy.
Yeah, everyone at the studio is super hyped. We're super excited to see the reactions and everything. So, yeah, I'm really excited about seeing what other stuff we have to show. So, yeah.
It's been one of the most asked about games since if I remember correctly, it got announced even before The Witcher 3 was like a known
2013,
thing.
yeah.
It's been a while now. So let's talk about the trailer. We can talk about gameplay, right? We can dive into that.
We can talk
cool.
about that.
Well, actually, let's just dive into that. I think that's what everybody probably wants to know about. So what can you tell us about the gameplay that the trailer might not have made clear?
Okay, so a few things. So first of all, the game is a first-person perspective role-playing game.
Okay.
There's a few reasons for that. The main thing that we really, we're spending a lot of time on creating this a very detailed cyberpunk world set in Night City. It's all handcrafted. There's a lot of atmosphere. We really want the player to feel the depression and the fact that these mega corporations are kind of stamping down on people's lives and kind of this, and to kind of really showcase that and to kind of really immerse the player in that world, we decided that the first-person perspective was the best way of doing it. And so it's first person, doesn't mean it's a first person shooter or anything like that. The game is definitely a role-playing game. So I really want to emphasize the fact that it's a role-playing game with some shooter elements rather than like a first person shooter with a bit of a role-play layered on top.
Sure.
We have very deep progression systems, so all the things you would expect from a CD Projekt Red game, multiple different progression systems actually, skills, attributes, perks, like cyberware obviously. So it's definitely a role-playing game in the first-person perspective.
And you were saying are you going to start with a base character and build them out, or are there going to be classes that you start from, or how will that work?
So the player takes on the role of V. She's like an urban mercenary hired gun. She takes on dangerous jobs, or he or she actually. She takes on dangerous jobs that no one else will. And as I was talking about before, we really wanted to give this feeling of the city being quite oppressive. So in order to kind of break free from this oppression, she really has to, the player's really focused on completing these different missions, freeing themselves from the state, building their own, defining their own rules. So the player plays as V, and we have a full character creation system in the game.
Yep.
So you'll be able to define your gender, whether it's male or female. You'll be able to define how you look. So we have various different body types, hairstyles, clothes, tattoos, makeups, and many, many more. And obviously you can define your what we're calling life path. It's like a backstory. And the things you define in your life path and your backstory can modify or unlock different things as you're playing through the game. Now, at the start of the game, we don't actually have any kind of classes that you pick from.
Okay.
Obviously, in Cyberpunk 2020, there's lots of different roles that you can partake on. So corporate, rocker boy, netrunner, techie, etc. At the start of the game, you're not picking any of those classes. Basically, as you're progressing through the game, you're modifying and adjusting your class based on the attributes, the perks you pick, the cyberware you install. So it's a very fluid class system. We don't lock you in at the very start of the game or anything like that. So.
Outside of the obvious Cyberpunk 2020, the property, what were some outside influences that you guys looked at for building Night City? I mean, a lot of people immediately were saying Blade Runner during the trailer, but what are some of those influences that factor in?
Yeah, I mean, as you can see in the trailer, we focused a lot on kind of trying to build the cyberpunk atmosphere in daytime, because we know for a fact that we can create the kind of moody, atmospheric, noir feeling that you get from Blade Runner. So for the trailer, we really wanted to showcase how you can take the cyberpunk elements of this dystopian world and kind of and show it when the sun's out. So because it's not something that you necessarily experience in traditional cyberpunk media. But that's not to say we don't have those Blade Runner noir-like elements. Actually, one of the terms that we're phrasing for the game story is like game noir. Like the story is very noir and how it works. Had the feeling and the different kind of missions and characters you're interacting with, it definitely has that noir vibe. So if anyone's worried that we're not going to have this kind of Blade Runner noir feeling, it's definitely going to be there. the game has a full day-night cycle with weather systems, so you get to experience both daytime and nighttime, and for sure we'll have that neon cityscape that people really are craving for.
One of the things I was interested in finding out is how you've taken Cyberpunk 2020 and tried to take the design elements from that and how you can translate those into a video game compared to a tabletop.
I mean, we've been working super closely with Mike Pondsmith, who's the creator of the 2020 rulebook. For sure, there's a lot of aspects from the 2020 rulebook which is built into the lore. So obviously, we take the city as a whole. The city itself is based. Night City is based on the 2020 rulebook. There's a lot of characters from the 2020 who will make an appearance in 2077. We can't go into details about how it will work or anything like that, but for sure there's characters from the lore that you can expect to find there. And then obviously in terms of the gameplay side, as I said before, the classes and the roles are prevalent in the game. We're kind of focusing on three main ones for the actual game itself, so Netrunner, Techie, and the Solo. But it's not like, as I said, it's not like you kind of pick one at the start and then you just play it through the way through. You basically craft your class or your archetype as you're playing through the game. So hypothetically, you can have bits of Techie and bits of Netrunner and bits of Solo, and you can kind of combine them. The other cool classes that are in there, in the game in general, like Rocker Boy and Corporate, they're kind of more in there from a lore perspective, from a story perspective. You'll encounter characters who represent those other alternate roles, but it's not something that we're going to allow the player to necessarily play with.
It's such a different aesthetic, obviously, than The Witcher, fantasy inspired, which was also based on existing properties. But what were some of the biggest lessons that the team took from their other properties, Witcher 1, 2, 3, 3 especially being the studio was maybe Witcher 2 was its breakout game, but Witcher 3 was just this phenomenon, right? What were some of the biggest lessons that the team found from Witcher 3 that really wanted to implement in Cyberpunk?
I mean, for sure, how we build an immersive world, the attention to detail that we put in Witcher 3, we're doing the same thing again, but in a completely new genre for us. We were very proud of how the story and quest system is in Witcher. So we're taking all of that stuff that we learned from Witcher 3, and we're taking it and putting it in Cyberpunk. As I said at the start, I really want to emphasize the fact that we're a role-playing game first and foremost, and not like a shooter or anything like that. It's choice and consequence of your actions, like how you interact with characters and the choices you make and how that affects the story is super important. We're a narrative-driven company first and foremost. It's the one thing that we're super passionate about and super proud about, and obviously the role-playing aspect as well. So how we built those quests and how we got the player immersed in those stories and those are the kind of things that we really want to translate to Cyberpunk. We're not really looking to build this epic tale that kind of is like a save the world kind of story. In the same vein of the Witcher games, we're really focused on personal stories, personal stories of the people in the world and personal stories for V as herself as well. So.
One of the things that's really special about CD Projekt is the relationship that you guys have with your fans. In particular, Witcher, the way that you handled DLC, and you're very open in talking to the fans about the games that you're making. Obviously, with Cyberpunk, you announced and then went quiet for so long, but even in your sort of re-reveal trailer, you kind of apologized for that. Going forward, what kind of relationship are you going to be having with getting details about Cyberpunk out? I
mean, we're going to be significantly more open, I think. I think that's the first thing. I mean, that's why we're so excited, really, because it's the start of us being able to talk about the game. We've been working on it for quite a long time, and we have a lot of information to share with people, and so I would for sure expect more information being drip-fed out over the next X amount of time. I don't really want to. I can't really.
You almost said it.
Yeah, I almost said it. So for sure we're going to be. We'll be interacting on social media. We'll be interacting on the forums. We'll be answering questions. Obviously, there's some things that we don't. For story is one thing that we want to keep that under wraps. But we'll be open to talking about how the gameplay works, what the player can do in the game. We're going to definitely be more open, I would say.
Can you talk a little more? I mean, you're saying it's not going to be, it's obviously not a shooter, it's an RPG, but still I think people, if you could talk about it, are probably curious about how combat will work in general.
Right. Okay, so we have both ranged combat, so we have guns, and we have melee-based combat as well. So, and obviously, we learned quite a lot from the combat in Witcher 3. And we're translating that, to kind of go back to your other question, we're translating that's the lessons we learned in the gameplay about how to do melee and try and transfer it to Cyberpunk. Obviously, it's very different in the fact that we're now doing it from a first-person perspective rather than from the third person. But the lessons that we learned in Witcher, we can definitely translate. And weapons-wise, we have basically there's three main types of weapons that you can, three kind of gameplay-themed style weapons that we have. We have power weapons, which are focused on like traditional weapons that you would have nowadays. So they're when you fire them, we may have, for example, exaggerated hit reactions and staggers to kind of emphasize the hit impacts. And then we have tech weapons, which are kind of focused on penetrating through walls and objects and NPCs and stuff like that. And then we have smart weapons, which are basically weapons which can track and follow targets around the game. We're again, because, and I keep going back to it, but because we're a role-playing game and we understand some people aren't necessarily averse to Twitch-based combat who like playing role-playing games. We tried to design, for example, the smart weapons around being something that people can pick up and play casually without necessarily have to be super efficient with shooting people in the head with more Twitch-based, reaction-based combat. So we're trying to cater to both audiences there with that. So, yeah.
So horses are gone, but it looks like there's flying cars. Is that how we're going to be getting around?
We will be getting around in vehicles.
Okay.
We're only really talking about right now is that for sure we're going to have motorcycles and we're going to have drivable cars.
Okay. Right.
The other vehicles that potentially in the game, we're not talking too much about that stuff right now. I mean, we have them obviously in the trailer, the AVs, and for sure they're going to be big narrative. There'll be going to be narrative set pieces where we utilize AVs a lot, but we're not talking about anything about the actual
Okay.
Yeah.
So as you play as V, is V going to be voiced?
Yeah. So we have both a male and female voiced V. For us, it's in the same way we had with Geralt. As a studio, we feel we can create more interesting and deep stories. Our stories are quite character-driven. So for us having someone who's voiced and is a named character, it allows us to build relationships better with characters. So that's why we decided to go with a named character rather than necessarily having a blank slate with no name and just can do completely whatever you want with. So V, in a sense, does have her own kind of personality, but you shape it as a player. So depending on your backstory that you select at the start and how you interact with characters, you can kind of shape V as a person as you're playing through the game. So
the cyberpunk aesthetic and genre, I guess, is so much less established than fantasy. What's it like working with cyberpunk and being able to do this kind of dystopia as opposed to this fantasy world?
I mean, I think that even in Witcher 3, we were kind of more dark fantasy than necessarily high fantasy.
Yeah.
So I think we're quite good at telling stories which aren't the most happy stories in the world. I think the biggest difference for us is obviously the fact that the feeling of the world is just very different from what we did in Witcher 3. And the feeling of the world and trying to understand the technology that is in the world. And we spend an awful lot of time, and it's something that as a studio, again, we're quite proud of, is that we spend a lot of time on figuring out details of the world, its lore, making sure it's believable, it has a purpose. And I mean, Cyberpunk's actually set in an alternative timeline to our own. So it's not like in 2077, it's a future based on our future as it is right now. It's kind of based on a future from the 1890s Cyberpunk future. So it's not like we can just take what we see here and try and transfer it to the game. We have to reinvent things based on how it was before in previous Cyberpunk literature. Is
it like a Southern California influenced area?
Yeah, so it's set in Night City, which is on the coast of California.
Gotcha.
It's in between actually Los Angeles and San Francisco.
Okay, cool.
But it's a fictional city.
Yeah.
So again, it gives us liberties to basically do as we want. Obviously, there's heavy inspiration from Los Angeles and San Francisco and San Diego and all those kind of things. We have all those elements in the city. And a bit like in, we really wanted to kind of emphasize the fact that there's 6 unique districts inside the city. So it's not like when you're traveling through, it's going to feel the same all the time. It kind of comes back to what I was talking about when you'll have the noir feeling and you'll have the days and night cycle. You'll also have kind of more upkept areas with the high rich corporates are staying, but you'll have areas like Pacifica which are kind of totally overrun with gangs, and it's just they kind of own the streets. It's very depressing. Poverty is everywhere. So it's you'll definitely, as you're traveling through the city and your different districts, you'll definitely feel the difference between the districts. So it won't feel the same wherever you're playing.
Okay.
And we really want to encourage the player to explore Night City. So, and the other big difference obviously is that with Witcher it was very like wide landscape, like horizontal, whereas for Cyberpunk we're really pushing verticality more. So we have a lot of buildings you can enter which have a lot of floors in them so you can explore. We have some things called like mega buildings, which are kind of like these huge complex micro societies in on themselves. They have like vendors and shops and gunsmiths and apartment blocks and all that kind of stuff, all inside like one big building. So when you're exploring the world, you go inside a mega building, you're like, okay, now I'm going to explore inside here and see what I can find. There's like stories to be told, there's like quests to find, missions to go on, stuff like that. So,
are you able to talk at all about, like, does V level up and stuff as she goes along? How is that going to work within the context of like such a huge world with side quests, main quests? Are things going to scale to your level? Can you over-level yourself?
We're not doing any kind of level scaling really. I mean, we basically have two forms of experience. We have like standard experience, which you'll gain from completing kind of core missions. And then we have what we call street cred, which is an alternate experience you gain from doing side missions.
Right.
And actually, when you're completing both main quests and side quests, you kind of get a bit of both, but we kind of separate that. We split the amount of each XP depending on if you're doing a main or side mission.
Okay.
So main missions kind of get core XP, and side missions get the street cred. Street cred's basically a way for you to, based on your street cred level, you can unlock different vendors and will unlock different fixes. Fixes are kind of like mission givers in this world, right? So they'll give you jobs to do, and you get access to new fixes as you're kind of leveling up your street cred. So.
Okay. Well, Kyle, unfortunately, that's all the time we have, but thank you so much for shedding more light on Cyberpunk.
Awesome.
Yeah, I know everybody has had questions for years now, so it's nice to be getting some of them answered, definitely.
Cool. Thanks a lot, man. It's been awesome.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And have a good rest of the week, and I might or might not, but definitely will maybe get to play the game later today, which I'm excited about.
Yes.
But anyway, thank you so much, Kyle.
Cool, no worries.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And if you're at home, keep around GameSpot. Stick around GameSpot. We will have the amazing adventures of Captain Spirit on very shortly. We'll see you then.